皆さんおはようございます。出席してくれて本当にありがとうございました。My name is Laura Kriska, and I was born in Japan. I grew up here in the United States, but right after college, I returned to Japan to work for Honda Motor Company. I was the only American woman working with thousands and thousands of Japanese colleagues. And I really wanted to fit in. I even wore a company-required, women's-only uniform. It was a blue polyester vest and skirt. Unattractive? But even wearing the uniform, I felt different. The way I spoke Japanese sounded different. The way I looked was different. People were very friendly, but I felt watched. There was a distinct us and them dynamic. And I was definitely a them. How many of you have felt like a them? Maybe it was in the school lunchroom where other kids made fun of your food. Gross. Or in a classroom where others didn't share your viewpoint. Or maybe you felt like a them because of the way you looked. Or maybe it had nothing to do with your appearance and everything to do with the fact that you were the new kid. The us versus them dynamic can be harmless. Yankees, Mets. But it can also be harmful, causing people to feel unwelcome or even unsafe. For some of us, feeling like a them is a temporary, passing situation. But for many people in the United States, feeling like a them is a way of life. Culture gaps are inevitable because we grow up differently. We have different languages, different norms of behavior. Some people shake hands when they meet, others bow. Some people kiss 3 times on the cheek. When I talk about culture gaps, I'm talking about gaps caused by a wide range of factors that make up any person's identity. Some of these factors are visible. It could be things like your age or your race. And some factors are invisible. It could be things like the languages you speak or your life experiences. For 30 years, I've been helping people bridge culture gaps around the world. And I have seen the harmful impact of the us versus them dynamic, causing misunderstandings or hurt feelings. Sometimes the negative impact is even bigger, resulting in costly business and legal problems. But I've also seen situations where individuals find ways to successfully bridge culture gaps. And this results in stronger relationships, better working environments, and improved business. I'd like to tell you about one small subsidiary in New Jersey where the gap between Americans and Japanese had grown so divisive that people didn't even greet each other in the morning. Over the years, this gap had hardened into a palpable divide, and you could see it if you walked into the cafeteria. You saw people seated and segregated by nationality. Employees wrote separate reports, they had separate meetings, and this, of course, wasted time. It failed to leverage their common goals. Even though there were fewer than 50 people in this one small office, there were some who didn't know each other's names. But inside this divided community was one American woman who knew all of her Japanese colleagues, and she liked them. She knew their first and last names, If they passed in the hall, she would greet them. And unlike many of her American colleagues, if she had a problem at work, she would go directly to a Japanese colleague for help. Do you want to know her secret? She smoked. Just like all of the Japanese colleagues. Yeah. So every day, several times a day, she would go into this small, cloudy room for a nicotine fix. And she would chit-chat with her Japanese colleagues. And she got to know them, both their visible and invisible factors. And over time, these frequent interactions formed the basis of a relationship that fundamentally disrupted the us versus them dynamic that had infected the rest of the office. So I feel like I need to make something clear. I'm not suggesting that you guys start smoking, right? Okay? Or vaping. But I do want to suggest that each of us every day make choices that either perpetuate or limit the us versus them dynamic. We choose whether to say hello to someone or not. We choose where to sit in a big room like this. We choose to make the effort to learn to say someone's name correctly. Or we choose to have lunch by ourselves or see it as an opportunity to connect with others. The only way to bridge culture gaps is through face-to-face interactions of increasing depth. And these face-to-face interactions start with a single gesture. One American woman I know fundamentally changed the culture of her company with a $10 box of donuts. She was in a brand new job in a huge Japanese company right here in New York. And in her department, there were Japanese speakers and English speakers. These two groups were divided by work responsibility, and they were also divided by where they sat in the office. Japanese colleagues sat on one side, English colleagues on the other. And over time, this divide had kind of taken root, and there was basically an unspoken rule that everybody just stuck to their own side of the office. So while there was no physical barrier, there may have been a 10-foot brick wall. So it's the Friday of this woman's first week of work, and she thinks, I'm going to get donuts to share with my brand new colleagues. Nice, right? So she's sharing the donuts with the English-speaking colleagues, and then she makes a choice that no one in the company has ever made. And she makes this choice because she's new. She hasn't had a chance to learn all the rules, spoken or unspoken. So she takes the donuts over to the Japanese side and offers one to a colleague. And the Japanese woman is kind of like, wow, surprise. But she takes a donut and says, thank you. The next week, the Japanese woman has some rice crackers. And she crosses over this invisible barrier and offers these to the English-speaking colleagues. And within days, they are calling each other by name and sharing cell phone chargers. And then these two women start to get to know each other. They're curious about each other's cultures and languages. And so they decide to start a word of the day email exchange. One day there's a word in English, the next day the word's in Japanese, and they share this back and forth. And other people hear about it, and they want to be included. And so this group becomes bigger and bigger and grows so popular that the company decides to start offering language lessons to anyone who wants to learn. And these classes now have gotten so popular that as soon as the company lists a new class being offered, registration fills up in 10 minutes. The us versus them culture in this company is being bridged by small gestures every day by hundreds of employees each time they use a word in the other language. This is how we disrupt the us versus them dynamic. And it all starts with a box of donuts or simply saying hello. When I was 22 and working for Honda in Japan, I felt like a them every day. I tried to bridge the gap. I had tea breaks with the other women. We'd have lunch. But my breakthrough event was hosting a Halloween party for my coworkers. After this event, I developed a much closer relationship with two of the women in particular. We started spending time together on the weekends. We took trips together. And because of these two relationships, I started to feel much less like a them and more like a we. And feeling like a we made my daily work life much more enjoyable. But being a we contributed to one of the greatest achievements of my professional life. Remember that women's only uniform? I never liked it, never. But it was a company rule. I assumed that the Japanese women did like it. But through my two friends, I learned something. They didn't like it either. And then I learned that most of the women in the company didn't like wearing these. So I decided to try to abolish women's uniforms. I know, I did. I recruited a diverse group of people. We had Japanese women, there was one French guy, an American man, but there was no us and them in our group. We were in complete agreement that that uniform had to go. And finally, after a lot of work, we did it. We changed corporate policy that has now been in effect for 30 years, positively impacting the lives of thousands of female employees. And it saved the company some money. You're welcome, Honda. And this is how a Halloween party led to vastly improved corporate change. Small gestures are the starting point for bridging any culture gap. And I'm not talking about gaps only related to business or only related to people from different countries. You never know where your small gesture might lead. You might make someone feel welcome. You might make someone feel safe. You might trigger a series of actions that fundamentally changes the way people think. You might change laws. I get so excited thinking about the positive impact that small gestures can make. Imagine the us versus them gaps we could close, the hurt feelings we could heal, the misunderstandings and dangerous actions that could be avoided if everyone in this room picked a them and committed to taking one action. What if everyone who ever watches this took one action? Sure, some of those actions will remain singular, but some of those actions will grow into meaningful change. It's true, I know, I did it. I believe so much in the power of small gestures. I am going to challenge all of you right now. Everyone has a them. Most of us have many thems. So right now, I'd like to ask everyone to think of a them. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's a whole group of people, but just pick one, okay? Now, I'd like to ask you to think of one action you could take to bridge the gap between you and your them. Try to make it specific, something actionable, something you could do in the next week. All right? Okay, here comes the hard part. I'm warning you. Because thinking of doing something and then actually doing it are very different. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to practice taking action by turning to the person next to you and saying out loud what your action is. You don't have to say who your them is. All you need to do is say out loud what your action is. Okay? Are you ready? Get set, go. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's so encouraging to watch you share. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I want to tell you that your sharing is more than I anticipated. It's so encouraging to watch you share like that. It's so clear to me that you have ideas, and these ideas are so important. When we make small gestures to bridge a gap with someone who might seem different, it becomes so clear that as humans, there is no us, and there is no them. It's only we. Thank you.